This is like fourth time working on getting this to work, this stream today. I've released everything from the cache, cleared the cache out. I got rid of programs that were installed over the last few days or updates, and we will see what happens. I did clear it up, I think, a little faster. Interesting is I did it in the with the other computer, and I left it on mute the whole time. So different environment, the habit patterns. This is stuff I talk about, but you got to move on. I find it interesting how many things can actually go awry. Hold on a second. Go. Sure, everything is working. All right. Let's see what we've got here. So this is an Ask Me Anything, but in the beginning, I want to provide some context and content so we have a way to move forward. During the early times of an Ask Me Anything, takes a while to get people showing up, and especially today because I wasn't able to go at the regular time, or I should say the technology glitched out at the regular time. So anybody who's planning on attending, they weren't able to. Now, I want to set it up by talking first about how I work through this process and pull it all together. Now, this is sort of where it started. The 7 areas: mental, physical, spiritual, and emotional. This is the agency. This is where what we control, our personal leadership. And we have to be effective here before we can be effective over here. You can have spurts and Johnny come lately, flash in the pan stuff, but long-term success in the relationships, professional and financial, requires you to have stability over here. We need to be stable, but in talking about stability, it's actually fast recovery. It's recovering so quickly because you can't stop external stimuli from happening. You can't stop the next big thing from occurring or getting in your face. But what you can do is get to the point where you recover very quickly. See, we're not fighting tigers. So our stimulus response cycle that looks at threats as tiger level, it's overkill. We don't need that kind of adrenaline and cortisol on everyday situations that occur. And so recovery becomes more important. It's not so much having anything ever impact us. And mental, physical, spiritual, when I say, I mean in our self, our higher self, our awareness of awareness, realm. And then emotional is like the gateway side, relationship, professional, and financial. Because emotional, you can be have everything in order here. You step over here, and you can be hijacked. The gateway to the right side. So we have to not only be straight here, but we have to have the ability to modulate our emotions. And the nature of the emotional side of it, we can't do this after the fact. We have to be able to do it modulating it during, or even preventing the emotion from escalating. Once the emotion goes too far, now you have the adrenaline and the cortisol, and it's a neurobiological event at that point, and it takes a long time to come down. And this is where we talk about the 7-step reset. The idea is that after the stimulus response cycle, and the actual cycle itself from the stimulus to the action, is 3, 4, 5, and 6. But then you like a small amount of time to get back to mindfulness and presence. Make sure you're able to access that which you know, and then get to coherence. This is the step number 2. So we want to be a stable mental, physical, spiritual, and emotional. We want to have a stable state of being, a productive state of being. I talk about it as coherence. If you don't have coherence, you have rigidity and chaos. And if you have a stimulus hit you while you're in rigidity and chaos, you're not going to be fully capable. The less we're coherent, the narrower our cognitive gets. So we have narrowing of the cognitive narrowing as we enter into stress response. And that's why people don't see things that are obvious to them or obvious to someone else. And at the extreme, it turns into just this thing that's constantly escalating. Let me check something here. Okay. Now, I'll go to and we'll take a look at a few different areas that I use as I'm working with the client, and we're going through this 7 performance areas, and I'm looking for where's their weak link, where's the weak link, and as soon as we stay under control, meaning aligned with their quest or their vision, then we start introducing the more challenging things over here. And in the beginning, it's not a problem because they're mental. But as you move towards transformation, transformation is going to bring in some big prizes, because a lot of times the reason that the thing that's kept us from transforming is that it's scary. When I say scary, the perception that this could lead to an anxiety spiral or something. So we have to start moving towards that and find out breaks, and then work on recovery there. Because at the end of the day, you want fast recovery no matter what happens, no matter how much chaos, how much activity is going on. You want to be able to get back to coherence quickly, and you have to do it in milliseconds. You can't do it in minutes and hours, and I'll tell you why. I'll show you why. So let's go to the full size here. Right. So the first area, and I just want to address this because it's part of it. There's a lot of talk. I mean, you can go on social media, and there's all sorts of solutions as to how you can break this and break from that, and manifestation. And I view most of the manifestation that I see talked about, look at it as what's going on with the network of neurons, and how the outcomes are actually just the process of science, not a manifestation from the universe. And it's important to understand that and understand those limits. In fact, I don't talk about anything that requires making assumptions. It's all based on once you get into making assumptions, then you're assuming it's from out there. And as you assume it's from out there, you're going to have less agency, because you don't have control. You're not sure where it's coming from. So first thing we're going to talk about is, I want to bring these 2 terms in. One you probably have heard of, homeostasis. And homeostasis is the system. Talk about the system. I'm talking about the brain and the central nervous system. Wanting to get to stability, and this has to do with this, not so much muscles. So the example would be lifting weights, and you hit those plateaus about every 8 weeks, right? There's a plateau, and this is why if you're working with a trainer, they change time. They're anticipating the plateau, and they change it up. What's going on is it's not that the muscle is getting weak; it's that the signal is but it's getting weaker not because of wear and tear. It's getting weaker because the brain is always predicting how much demand is coming, and when it figures that out, it prunes back on the amount of synapses that's available. When there's less neurotransmitter available, you're going to have a weaker signal, but it's strong enough to lift that weight. It's strong enough to lift the weight that you were lifting before. By changing it up, you flood the system with more neurotransmitter, and it's able to then get stronger. The other one is allostasis. So allostasis is when you're continuing to the central nervous system is predicting what's going to come, and you're continuing to exceed what it predicted. The more you exceed what it predicted, it's going to keep flooding with neurotransmitter. As you flood with neurotransmitter, you're able to maintain a strong signal. Dopamine is not only a habit formation neurotransmitter, it's also a signal amplifier. And without that signal amplifier, it's just more difficult. It's very easy to see in the physical area with activity and exercise, et cetera, because neurotransmitters, there's a form of neurotransmitter called glutamate, and that gets the signal from the central nervous system to the neural pathway. And then there's another neurotransmitter, acetylcholine, which gets the signal from the neural pathway to the muscle junction. And so when when there's a short neurotransmitter and the brain is kind of stingy on that because it's energy intensive, as that neurotransmitter degrades or is reduced, you're going to have a weaker signal, and that's why you feel like the muscle can't do what it needs to do. And it's also why you see power lifters who are very small. They don't look big at all, but they're strong. They've been exercising the signal, and I'm sure there's genetics too. But the more they exercise the signal, they can get that power done without being big. So it's not just muscle; it's the signal. The reason this is important is because it applies to cognitive as well. So the same things that are applied in the neural pathways with the physical activity, it applies with cognitive as well. So cognitive processing is actually in the network of neurons. So in homeostasis, what it's doing is it's attempting to stabilize at the status quo. And that might be slightly upward. You can really see this happening. Well, let me get back to that. So right now, what'll happen is you may have spikes. So you have a hack. Hacks don't work long term. They work short term, but then you drop back to status quo. You do another hack, and you're constantly cycling through this. The reason hacks, I say, don't work long term is because you have 100 billion neurons, each interacting with 1,000 to 10,000 other neurons, and you have all of those associations, trillions of associations, all working to get back to status quo and efficiency. So the hack is like an anomaly, and the system absorbs that hack and gets back to status quo. On the other hand, you have allostasis, and this you can see very clearly when people are doing through hiking. And a through hiker might be going from the border of Canada to Mexico. So they're doing a 90-day hike or so. And in the beginning, you'll see them doing eight miles a day, and then it's 10, and then 15 miles a day, then 20. And by the end of the hike, they might be doing 30 miles a day. So allostasis is something similar to homeostasis, but instead of getting stabilization at the status quo, it's getting stabilization on an upward trajectory. And that's what we're going after, is getting to the point where we have allostasis at the upward trajectory, which means you have to adjust it. And there are 7 factors that lead to this. Novelty, so you need something that's new. This is like deep practice, but it's more than deep practice. This is more so about generating neurotransmitter production. So you have novelty, intention, precision, and balance. And that balance could also be complexity. Physical activity, we're talking about balance, but in cognitive speak, it's more complexity, progression, and explosiveness. Again, in cognitive speak, we might be talking about intensity bursts. So I'll put an I there for intensity bursts, and under balance, I'll put a C for complexity. And then we have struggle at the edge of ability. So struggle. So novelty, intention, precision, balance / complexity, progression, explosiveness / intensity, and struggle at the edge of ability. And this is how we communicate to the central nervous system in the brain that there's more demand coming. And that's what generates this ability to keep increasing. Now, obviously, you're going to have other limits. You have structural limits, you have muscle limits. And if you are doing work on the neurotransmitter production, you can overdo it and start pushing into muscle. And as you push into muscle, you are going to introduce the need for recovery. When you're just working on neurotransmitter production, you won't find that need for recovery. So it's a more of a zone that you're operating. The one is talk about this thing about reactive. There's 3 kinds of habits which I'll talk about, and one of the most difficult ones to deal with, and one I go after early when I'm talking about the 7 performance areas, and I'm working through the mental, physical, spiritual, emotional, and wanting to get to full agency. We have to get the reactive ones, avoid those things that cause the reaction, but over time we build in the recovery so that the reaction is not happening. We do move through a recovery, and then after recovery, we are going to remove the reactive piece. This is different because when I talk about emotional modulation, you're not suppressing the emotion. With the reaction, I'm looking to avoid it and later on reduce to the point where it's not happening. You're recovering so quickly that there is no reaction. The thing about it, if you try to suppress the reaction, all you're going to do is keep escalating it because that reaction is coming from something that feels like there's life or death. When I showed you the 7-step reset, the thing that reset, we have this stimulus is happening here, the response is happening here. The reaction is actually at the subconscious or the network of neurons level. It converts that information over to the conscious mind. It converts that information to the conscious mind, and that is the response. But when you're triggered, that response may happen. It's just reaction to reaction. So the response actually becomes the reaction. And I just had a pop up to restart my computer. I probably had to do with some of the work I did earlier on it. So what I'm talking between the reaction and the conscious mind. The reaction is at the unconscious level, and it converts the impulse or the signal to the the neural pathways into something that's perceived by the conscious mind, a thought, sensation, emotion, feeling. And then at this point, we also condition at the network of neurons level. We condition in that habit to pause and quickly assess, do we need to, is this thing escalating? Do we need to modulate emotions? Because you want to do the emotional modulation in that first 90 seconds. Eventually that'll become a habit. It's not going to take 90 seconds every time. Get very, very quick after you've conditioned it in. And then once you're emotionally stable, you can then go into action. Then it's 7, 1, and 2, back to presence and mindfulness. And then 1 and 2, you're ready for the next stimulus. So this is important because, as you see, it says 33,000 daily stimulus response cycles. What's going on here is, hold on a second. Right. So I'm clearing out a lot of the cache and all that. I reset settings and check that. We were talking about the 33,000 stimulus response cycles. And if I draw this, you have a stimulus response, and we're awake about 65,000 seconds per day. It's having 33,000 stimulus response cycles every other second. So you have these periods of stimulus response cycles throughout the day, roughly 30 per minute. So this just keeps on going. And ideally, to be in coherence in between. This is that step 2 of the 7-step reset. You're in coherence, mindful, presence, and you're what I call recovered or stable and prepared for that next stimulus. Occasionally, you might get a spike. Now, 2 things could happen. That spike could stay high, or you can recover. And this is what we're after. We're after recovering from the spike so we get back to this even keel. And that's going to keep you from being triggered. If you take this path and then the next stimulus is also a difficult one, now you're up here. And if the next one is a difficult one, now you're up here. And you can see how this turns into a bad day. Do it if you have a bad week. Now, doesn't mean you're not going to have bad weeks without this, because we go through cycles, have energy cycles, etc. But that's what's going on. If this happens, if you go off here, then there's a different scenario, because these collapse. You go from stimulus every other second to having a stimulus response every other second to a stimulus response happening in milliseconds. So in a 2-second period, you can have dozens of stimulus response cycles. And when you're doing this, there is no external stimulus time. You're doing internal stimulus. It's you are essentially reacting to your own reactions. And this is why you can't have a rational conversation with somebody, because you are an external stimulus trying to impact something that's going on inside, and then ratcheting it up. And that process will go on until you can interrupt it. So when you interrupt the pattern, and this happens, you may have seen somebody arguing and they're like so high energy and everything, and then all of a sudden something happens, the phone rings or someone shows up and they go calm. It's like there was enough of an interruption, but it's because of the surprise option, and they come out of looking internally into widening the cognitive widening again. But you can see how this happens, and it just takes off. This is what we need to avoid. This is why I brought up the reactive. If you have a habit of being reactive, it's going to be harder for you. It's necessary for your quest, because an external stimulus can come in and it triggers you into being reactive. And if you don't recover quickly enough, now you're reacting to your own reactions, and it's just going to. There is another one that I want to draw, because this is the target goal. And while I don't lead with meditation, I do urge people to find a form of meditation that works for them. Meditation is not, and this idea is not getting good at meditating. The idea is to get good at life. When you are meditating, you can extend the amount of time that you are in. Let's say you meditate for I'm just making this up for example purposes. Let's say you're awake 16 hours, you take for 8 hours. The likelihood of you going fight or flight in that next 8 hours is much lower. That's an extreme example to illustrate that. If you meditate, let's say meditate a half hour a day, and the first day you may extend that peaceful time or that presence 10 minutes or 15 minutes. But the more you meditate for, the more you'll be able to extend it to the point where you can come all the way around full circle and you're just staying present. This is, if you are hiking, this is why people like certain activities: hiking, motorcycle riding, and the twisting, skiing, skateboarding. Anything requiring a lot of attention is going to slow down your network of neurons and allow you to have some of that calmer time. And the more you spend in this coherence, the easier it is to get into the coherence. And when you're in that coherence, you have more periods of time where you are here. And if you do happen to get a spike, that spike, you can recover much faster. So not only is the spike lower in amplitude, the duration is lower, especially relative to your stimulus response cycles, and then you're back to presence. And you're, because you are doing this in a way that actually reduces the amount of stimulus response cycles you have in a day, because you're not seeing as many things. You're literally ignoring by habit the things that don't matter. If you consider that we're hit with probably 10,000 headlines per day, ad stimuli per day, some of those headlines don't even matter, but they trigger you. That's what they're designed to do. They're designed to get your attention and then remind you of some pain. And then after being reminded of that pain, it takes you down this path, and then you're looking for a solution, and they're presenting the solution. That's ad copy. And if you're seeing 10,000 headlines a day, part of it is because you're hyper aware of things that might cause danger. We switch that around by training your subconscious to be less biased towards threat and more biased towards positive and neutral. So that's the piece, and why we want to get being reactive. We want to get that solved on. It makes it a lot easier to deal with the other things. And this is, for example, if you're working with somebody, you have to get them separated from themselves, so to speak, so they're not being reactive. You have to do things, and I use the word, by going meta, by coming out of it. If you want to have a conversation with somebody about what happened before, you use words, like, and say something like, so if you were watching that conversation, what will you observe? Just by doing that, they're seeing a different thing. Another technique, if somebody's having trouble with somebody that's difficult, they think the other person is being difficult, one of the things you can do is have them imagine that they're going around looking over the shoulder of the other person at a conversation that they're having, and tell you what they're seeing. So in other words, they're watching themselves. they're looking at themselves, having this conversation with this supposedly difficult person, and you're asking them, what do you see? What are some things? They will start, because now they're out of it. They're not reacting. They're seeing with more clarity, maybe the facial expressions, maybe the person, they see themselves talking more or not or interrupting or what have you. So that's the active piece. The next one that I'm looking for is, first, I have to get this clear. This is one of the things we established right off the bat with this series, is that in the mental area, making sure that people understand that there's a distinction between the network of neurons and the conscious mind. And that has to be reinforced over and over. Because there's so much habitual patterns around thinking of it, the subconscious as a mind. And then there's a handoff, the transition over to the conscious mind, where it converts the neural pathway signal to something that can be perceived by the conscious mind. So what's going on here, and I will add this pre-listening period. So there's a pre-listening of about a tenth of a second. And that pre-listening is just looking at reading the room. What's likely to come up. It's looking for what are the potential risks that I see here, the threats. That's part of the subconscious training that we have to take care of. So this here is about 600 milliseconds, because the conscious mind has a reaction time of a half second. And when you add on the extra 100 milliseconds, when you add on the extra 100 milliseconds, you have, for the pre-listening, you have about 600 milliseconds, and this is broken into three parts. This is the early part. It's actually from about here to there, and then the part in the later part. So there's different things you can do. I don't want to get into now, but there's different things you can do here, very, very early, things you can do here. And this is where the majority, you want to catch the majority here. And then there's things that are gonna happen over here. Then, if I look at this whole thing together, this is the fastest. This is high impact, and low effort. It takes only a small amount of effort to make habit change or to pattern to recover. Low effort to recover here, high impact per amount of effort you put in place. As you extend, what happens is, so here, if you can change it here, it's in milliseconds. If you don't catch here, and you extend it out here, you're talking seconds. Because the conscious mind side, it's low impact, high effort to recover. So when I talk about this recovery, you think about interrupting the pattern and then redirecting it. So that rapid recovery is a redirection, but to redirect, you first interrupt the pattern. And when you're doing it over here on this side, it's so fast that it doesn't even look like anything is happening. And then when you get out here, it's turning into minutes and then later hours. So we're going from an impulse after the impulse, that's the early phase, milliseconds. And then after the impulse, you start to forgive. And then it turns into emotional escalation. And that's why I talked about the emotion being the gateway to the right side, because once this emotional escalation happens, it's going to get bigger. You're going to get more identity attachment. And then it hits hours when it becomes behavior. Because once it becomes behavior, then there's all kinds of justification for that behavior. At the extreme, you've seen where people are so reacted to the situation that it appears that they're changing the facts to match their feeling. That's what's going on. They're literally changing the fact to match their feeling, and it makes it hard. The longer you wait, the harder it is to make a difference. This was fine in hunter-gatherer time to do it, to take a long time, but now with things coming so fast, you could walk out the door and be hit with several ad stimuli right off the bat, or several stimuli. Then you also have the internal ones coming. It's not just the external ones. You now have the internal ones coming because you never did process the thing that happened in the morning, and then you didn't process the thing from last night, and you didn't, and etc. And now you're reacting to external stimuli, but you're also reacting to internal stimuli, and it's like you can see where you go. So then the last part of this to bring in, I said there's three kinds of habits at a high level. You have behavior, you have the reactive kind. So we just talked about reactive. Behavior would be you want to stop scrolling, you want to stop eating chocolate, you want to go start exercising. And there's things you can do with these. You can, like James Clear in the book Atomic Habits, he talks about setting up your cues differently, like putting your gym clothes out, or having your gym bag in the car already, just different. Or maybe if you want to stop eating chocolate, just get all the chocolate out of the house. There's different things that you can do to make it easier to set behavioral habits. Reactive is hard because you don't always see it coming. You don't know where it's coming from. As a coach, I can watch and see the patterns, and it's very easy to start depicting where these things are coming. And then you could talk to the person about what's coming up for you. What are you thinking about with that? And kind of step back and look at it. So do you remember a time when this may have something like this happened before? Because what you're doing is helping them see and get some cognitive dissonance around the connection of whatever they're reacting to and the real association from years ago. Once you can present to them that this association that you're responding to, that you're having these reactions to, is from the past, the cognitive dissonance will start to whittle away at that connection. But you may have more of these. So this is the one that I will avoid in the beginning. If I see it coming, I just change the subject, and then come back to it and whittle it away so that we can have a conversation without seeing the reaction. And then the last kind of the constructs. And I would say these are difficult for a different reason. These might be on level of skill, a level of 1 to 10. These might be 1 to 3, and I don't have any science to back that up, but let's say 1 to 3. And then reactive type habits are like 6 to 8. And then the constructs tend to be 9 and 10. And the reason they're 9 is people believe that they're fixed. So constructs would be like personality, identity, and confidence. Those are just some examples. So imagine a person trying to become more confident at work, and you change it at level. We don't change these at the construct level, elements level. And you may have to stop some of the reaction. You may have to change some behaviors. And what you can do is start scaling in. So this is why when I'm doing work with people, we start with small stuff, and easy, small, easy stuff. We bring that small, easy stuff it more frequently, and then we ran the same way you would exercise. Then you increase the load, so to speak, and have it a little bit more difficult, but give every time, and then give them more loads quicker and quicker. Eventually, you'll see that these things shift and their personality. See, the personality is a reflection of habits. When you change the habits, your personality is going to be different. People see your personality and they say, your habits are not you. No, your habits are not you, but your habits form a personality that's displayed. And in forming that personality that's displayed, it basically is you. Because if they say so is like this, they're describing your personality. The personality is a construct of the habits. By change elements, you change your personality. And think of it like this: your personality opens doors for you, and it also closes doors for you, or keeps doors closed. So by you change your personality, then you now open doors for yourself. We have identity and we have confidence. And confidence works the same way. I like with a fighter, they're having easier fights in the beginning because they need to get the reps in there. You know, I was thinking similarly that just the other day, if you get hurt doing something, you're kind of tentative about doing it, but you do it anyway. And the first time you may go easy. The second time you go a little harder, a little harder, a little harder. You were, because your confidence built along the way. It's easier to do that when you've done it before. A little more when it's something new. So that was, as I said, these are designed as Ask Me Anythings. You can come online and join the conversation by using that link, but it's in the chat or the comments. It's easier to just click the link rather than try to figure all that out. But it's restream.io, ESKCIVX. I'm sorry, CLVX-CBL. So K-CLVX-CBL. And that will get you into the room here, and we can have a conversation on stage, or just you can think in the comments and I'll see it. It's just on different platforms, and I don't always see it come into the comments. And meanwhile, I'm going to start answering some questions that I have from others earlier times. All right, one of them, why do I keep reacting the same way even when I know better? So I kind of answered the neurons that fire together wire together. So it helps to look at the neuron side versus the conscious side. The neurons that fire together wire together. And because we have trillions of associations, to have more and more things connected. So if you have a pattern of getting very reactive, and it's been a long time, let's say you get in this setting, and then in that setting, and then in that setting, all of those can become anchors. And as they become anchors, it's much easier to react. And the more you're reacting, the less you're working on your own agenda, your conscious agenda, because you're reacting to past associations, and those association threat, possibly a fight or flight threat level. So the slowing down by coming out of your, looking at yourself across the room and saying, okay, what was really going on? And you'll start to whittle away some of those reactions. But we also use the positivity exercise, where you shift the subconscious from biasing towards threat to biasing towards positive and neutral. And that's going to slow it down some. And then the other one is emotional modulations. In that step 2 of the 7-step reset, you'll use emotional modulation sometimes to get back to presence. It's easier to not react when you're emotionally calm than it is if you're already in a stress response. And the point is, the question is, why do I? The answers there that are causing you to jump into fight or flight. You're not going to fix it by suppressing the fight. You have to start identifying what is it that you're reacting to. And this is where having a coach helps, because they're watching from the outside. You're inside of a feed, and you're doing it on yourself, and it's hard to get out of that feedback loop. How do I help a client who understands the model but still can't interrupt their reactions? I would say it's difficult in the beginning to interrupt reactions, but one of the things to do is start meditating, have them meditate for short periods. People who are very reactive that I've run into don't worry about meditating. It's just not something they're interested in, because they think of meditating as having to calm the subconscious, or that in a chatter, and the inner chatter just keeps going and going and going. So what you can do, have them meditate for shorter minutes, times, a minute, 1 minute moment. There's even a book, 1 minute moment. That's not the exact title, but it talks about meditating for 1 minute and then extend it to 2 minutes and then extend it for 3 minutes. If you just do 4 box breath cycles, breath is 4 seconds inhale, 4 seconds hold, 4 seconds exhale, 4 seconds hold, and you do that 4 times, that's a minute. You can just do 4 box breath cycles in a row, and that's going to calm you down, because breathing is one of the fastest ways to interrupt the pattern in the early stages. Once it's off and running, it's going to take a lot more, but in the beginning, just a good breath through your nose and a nice long exhale will get them back, will get the reaction to be less. And the sooner you do it, the less we have to do. And as I said, this high impact in the beginning with low effort. So the earlier you can get it, as soon, you don't wait for you to be consciously aware, or don't have them not wait for themselves to be consciously aware. As soon as they feel it rising up is when they take that breath in and then exhale. What do you do when a client wants identity change, but they won't work on the behavior level reps? And you've got, this is why I say start with purpose. Some of these things are like way at the tail end of a pattern. So we have to start with purpose and making sure that the purpose is big enough and real enough for the person. When I say purpose, it could be a proxy for purpose, but their why has to be big enough that they roll over broken glass. And then you just keep coming back to that. You frame everything in the context of that. And you also get them to say no to something. So you have to, purpose is like a cone. If 12 o'clock on the clock face is direction of travel, you have a nice pivot cone from about 11 to 1. So you have about 60 degrees in there and still have your momentum. What we want to do with that is have them ignore, say, from 4 o'clock to 8 o'clock. That's something they should just, because it's the opposite of their direction. They don't need to worry about it. So by slowing down or reducing what they pay attention to, you're going to have fewer and fewer stimulus response, and that's going to start giving you some inroads. But you got to have a big enough purpose. And if the way I'm reading this, they want identity, won't do the behavior level reps. You have to be able to see some progress. And I would say one of the things you can do is implementation intentions. There's a sticky area that they struggle with. You have them do mental rehearsals. They're going to get into that area, going to do this instead of that. That will work, but they have to be patient with it. When they first few times they do it, they'll be aware, but their habit is to keep going anyway. This is why I was talking about the spiritual, this awareness of awareness. They'll have the awareness, but they keep doing it anyway. And what you want to do is get them to go to the door. What I mean by this, the mental rehearsal will first just open the door. First, it just shows you the door. Then it opens the door for you. The mental rehearsal does. But you have to go through. So it's sort of like if you said, I'm not going to scroll on social media after 7 o'clock at night, and then you're on social media and you're aware of it and you're saying, I'm not supposed to be doing this, but you keep doing it. Down. At some point, you do have to take action. None of these things are going to make you do it because you still have will. But what they're going to do is reduce some of the automaticity that's fighting against you. And eventually you're going to have the automaticity working for you. That's what we do in the 7 performance areas. And we use the 7-step reset to make that happen. Here's a good one from on the leadership side. How do I help my team catch reaction cycles before they become culture? I really stopped at the idea that you can get people to change. You can create the environment that people want to change or adjust. But what you can do as the leader is take responsibility for the part that you're contributing to these reaction cycles. Just like I said, we feel it coming up. And telling tension is an example. If you're a speaker or a leader, you've been experienced giving a message, and then you run into this telling tension. When that telling tension happens, there's first a feeling that comes up in yourself. You spot it in other people. You see something, you see maybe they rise up a little bit, maybe their face changes, they lean forward, they're moving their hand, they want to spit, they see some agitation happening. That's that telling tension. Something that was said triggered, or they maybe something said created a thought, and that triggered this sensation that's coming up. So as the leader, in this case, rather than think about how do I stop them from having reactions, as a leader, you start noticing the reactions sooner, trusting your subconscious, because the conscious mind sees it after the subconscious. So the subconscious sees it, network of neurons. It senses the reaction or picks up the reaction. And at that point, when you pick up on it, you can slow down and say, let me just stop here and see what's coming up for you guys. Let me stop here and do a quick check-in. By doing that, you're interrupting it. Remember this diagram here. By interrupting it in the milliseconds or even the seconds level, it's a lot easier to change it than it is after it gets going. This thing is exponential once it gets into the conscious mind side. It becomes exponential in terms of how difficult it is, and it's significantly reduced in terms of how much impact you can have. So rather than thinking of stopping them from having reactions, think of yourself as catching the early stages of that reaction and having them verbalize it, because when they verbalize it as an impulse, there's no attachment, there's no identity connection, there's no narrative, there's no emotional part of it. It's just an objective thing. But if you let it go, that objective thing, that impulse gets a narrative, and then it gets an identity connected to it, and now they're going to defend it. Once they start defending it, you're pretty much you need to wait and catch it on the next one, because defending it now is identity, and then it's emotional, and then there's consistency coming into play, cognitive biases come into play. It just gets harder. How do I catch myself earlier instead of realizing it after I've already escalated? That's a good one. And I would say that you want to start paying attention to that first feeling that you have. And we've all experienced it, but because we think of it as physiological and people tend to think of cognitive as mental, they ignore it. That is cognitive processing. That sensation that you feel coming up, you feel it way before, well, a whole half second before you think it or before you notice it with the mind. But it's a sensation that comes up. You might feel a quick tightening, a flushing, of just, the maybe blood flow. Something happens initially, and that what you can do. There's several things you can do. This is what I was talking about in the first 1, 2, and 3. In the first one, you can change your perpetual question. Instead of asking questions like, am I safe? Or is this going to be okay? What's wrong with me? Instead of asking questions like that, it's how can I use this? How do I recover quickly? What's good about this? Just having a different perpetual question is a good start. In this number 2 area, so this is like 200 milliseconds in, 0.2 of a second in. Some things that are very effective. Breathing in through your nose quickly. What I do, I just turn my head. I look at something else. When I feel it coming up, I just turn my head and I look at something. I may grab a pen and start writing, but I am interrupting that pattern. And by turning my head, I'm looking at something else. It takes the attention off of that thing. Remember, that internal sensation can very quickly lead to reacting to your own reactions instead of the external stimulus. By turning my head, I'm introducing an external stimulus. It forces the pattern to interrupt. It works a lot better early on than it does later on. You can click that link if you like to join in the conversation if you want to, and I'll do a couple more. But that's one of the ways. And then still inside the 600 milliseconds, the third 2/10, what I like is I use anchoring. So I do breathing. You don't have to go for 10 minutes. I do breathing for 10 minutes in the morning, 15 seconds inhale, 15 seconds exhale. So I'm doing 2 breaths a minute. And while I'm doing that, I'm in a calm state, because you can't be agitated and breathing that slow. Your stress goes up. So you're you're not suppressing it. You're allowing stress to move away by breathing. And you don't have to start with 15. You'll start with 5 in, 5 out. It's going to work. And during that time, I'm not letting myself be agitated. I'm thinking about things. I have this like implementation intentions, mental rehearsal. And by being in that calm state, if I feel something coming up, I can turn my head, I can take in a breath through my nose, but I so anchor back to that feeling. Remember, every day I do this. So I have a that's available to me because it's a state that I've already been in. Sort of like I was saying before, when you meditate and extend the meditation and get to the point where you're lengthening the amount of time that you're in presence or you have coherence. And I'm doing that here. I'm taking that coherence that I have in the morning and bringing it to by just that breath gets me settled into it. So again, you can use anchors, you can use hand anchors, you can get up, just stand up and maybe walk to the window. This situation allows that. Walking through a doorway, again, and looking around, but I would avoid looking down because you want to be picking up external stimulus, and you want to avoid. This is when when they said you got to get out of your head. If you're in your head, because in your head means you're looking at your own reactions. You're reacting to your own reaction. So you reacting to your own reaction. You don't want to do that. One stimulus, and your subconscious saw that one stimulus and interpreted it as a tiger. Now you're stacking, but the rest of the stacking coming inside. There was only one stimulus and wasn't even a tiger, but because it was treated as a tiger, you're now reacting to reactions to How do you train someone the first 600 seconds if they're not aware of it? It's a good question. I don't want to be aware of it. It's something that happens. So you have to stop the reactivity, and we have to stop the bias towards threat. The way you stop the reactivity part of it, that is active. You literally have to do it and use the cognitive dissonance, as I said. But this is not always the case. Most people are not having activity problems that much. I mean, at some point it becomes a mental health issue, and I don't talk about mental health. At some point that becomes a mental health issue and not. But the big step that I do is I use positivity training, and this is not positivity in the sense that you're thinking about. I'm training the subconscious. Remember, the subconscious is a network of, you train things with association. So the way you train a dog to sit, they don't understand language like sit, but they've associated that tonality with you. So it's an association, and that's the same way you train your subconscious. You train it with association. So what we do is 6 weeks, 3 sets a day. Each set is 3 reps, and each rep is 30 seconds. So I do 30 seconds 3 times, and then 30 seconds 3 times, and then 30 seconds 3 times. So that's 3 sets per day. I recommend doing it with meals so you remember. It only takes you 90 seconds. And what you do is and every time you do it, every single rep is different. You want to, and start small. Think of something that was inconvenient, and that little negative feeling that you have. It's got to be small in the beginning. The little inconvenience, that little negative feeling you have, immediately look for the positive context, the thing that this is part of. What's the umbrella? So if you got a flat tire, yes, it's convenient, but you have a car, and the car is the greater positive context. Maybe you were in a meeting and you forgot your paperwork, and you feel, oh man, I feel so bad. It doesn't happen. You just feel bad about it. Well, the greater positive context is you were invited to the meeting, that you have a job, that. So this is not positive mental attitude. It's not reframing. Literally putting this thing, conditioning your subconscious to see an impulse and ask itself the question, is part of the greater positive context? Forget the threat question. Is this part of the greater positive context? That's why I like using the car example. Well, you may have lost some money. The greater positive context is you have a source of income to even have the money. Just automatically you have to get it out of everything as a threat. And by doing that, when you're training the subconscious, literally by doing this 3 times for six weeks, you're literally training the subconscious to scan very quickly, is this part of a greater positive context? If it's part of a positive context, it can't be a threat. And the context being the car or the it's not the greater good, it's the what is the positive thing that's enabling this. You lost the game in sports. You lost the game. Well, the greater positive context is you know how to play. The greater positive context is you had an ability to compete. It's you want to get out of everything as a threat, because very few things are a threat, and even the threats are very small compared to the subconscious treating it as a Serengeti tiger. You don't need a journalist to deal with an email. It's like that. All right, I'm gonna leave it there, and we'll come back. It looks like I've gotten my technology straightened out. I've been able to go this whole period of time without having yeah, good. I've gone this whole period. Any freezing up, everything's been fine. So clearing the cache, getting rid of the recent new programs, and because I go live every day, for whatever reason, it seems like it picks up a lot of cookies and trash in my system. So there you go. I'll next Wednesday at 7 o'clock Pacific